Hey, what's up, guys? Thanks for stopping by. I'm Odlum, and you're in the deep end. In today's story, I'm diving into a decade long nightmare that the government tried to bury. If you like stories that stick with you, consider subscribing for new nightmares twice a week. But for right now, I want you to head back to a Tuesday night in 2011. It was a cold February night in a quiet working class neighborhood on the west side of Windsor, Ontario. For those of you who don't know, Windsor sits right on the Canada US border, separated from the city of Detroit by the dark, churning waters of the Detroit River. It was a Tuesday night, right around 11:30 p.m. Mike Prevost was doing exactly what you'd be doing on a random Tuesday night. He was sitting on his sofa, the TV was probably on some late night highlight reel, and he was just finishing up a glass of water before heading to bed. The house was completely quiet. His wife had already gone upstairs and was fast asleep. But then, Mike heard it. At first, Mike didn't even look up from his phone. It started as a low, dull thrum. He described it later as sounding almost exactly like a neighbor's diesel truck idling right outside his driveway. You know that sound? That steady, heavy sound of a big engine that vibrates in the air? Mike waited for the truck to pull away. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Eventually, Mike got annoyed. He put his glass down on the wooden coffee table, stood up, walked to the front window. He pulled back the heavy curtain, ready to give the driver a look that said, "It's late, buddy, move it along." But when he looked out, the street was empty. There were no trucks, no neighbors. Just the yellow glow of the street lights reflecting off the wet asphalt. Mike thought to himself, "That's weird. Maybe it's a plane?" He looked up to the sky, but the clouds were thick and still. He went back to the couch and sat down, but the second his head touched the cushion, he felt a jolt go through his body. It wasn't just a sound anymore, it was a physical sensation, a rhythmic, pulsating vibration that felt like it was coming from deep within the foundation of his house. He reached out and touched the arm of his sofa. It was trembling. He looked at the glass of water he had put down on the coffee table. The surface of the water wasn't just moving, it had perfect, concentric ripples, like a heartbeat was pulsing through the wood of the table and into the glass. Mike didn't sleep at all that night. He spent the early hours of Wednesday morning walking from room to room with a flashlight, trying to find a source. He checked the furnace. He checked the water heater. He even went down into his crawl space, thinking maybe a pipe had burst and was rattling against the joists. But every time he moved, the sound seemed to stay the same distance away. It was coming from everywhere at once. By 3 a.m., Mike's dog, a usually calm golden retriever named Barnaby, started acting up. Barnaby wouldn't go near the kitchen floor. He stood at the edge of the carpet, his fur bristling, and let out a low, terrified growl. Mike looked at his dog and whispered, "You feel it too, don't you?" Over the next week, Mike started falling apart. It wasn't just the lack of sleep. He started getting these massive, splitting migraines that wouldn't go away with aspirin. He started getting nosebleeds in the middle of the day. And worst of all was the dread. Imagine trying to eat dinner or talk to your wife while your brain is constantly telling you that a predator is standing 6 inches behind you. Mike thought he was losing his damn mind until he went to work on Monday and saw his neighbor, Gary. Gary looked like a ghost. He had dark circles under his eyes, and the first thing he said to Mike was, "Do you hear the truck too?" Mike told Gary about the rattling windows and the ripples in his water glass. Gary just nodded, his hands trembling and his eyes darting around. Gary's house was closer to the river, and his experience was even more brutal. He described the thrum not just as a sound, but as an invasive force. His windows weren't just rattling, they were vibrating so violently they sounded like they were about to shatter in their frames. Then Gary dropped the detail that changed everything. He told Mike that his wife had stopped sleeping in their bedroom days ago. She had moved her pillow and blankets into the ceramic bathtub in the guest bathroom. It was the only place in the entire house, heavy, grounded, and disconnected from the wooden floor joists, where the constant rhythmic pulsing didn't make her feel like her stomach was doing somersaults. They realized then that they weren't suffering from a broken furnace or a neighbor's bad muffler. This wasn't a neighborhood problem. This was an invisible assault coming from somewhere much larger and somewhere much darker. By 2012, this epidemic was called the Windsor Hum. The city finally organized a telephone town hall. They expected maybe 100 residents to call in. 22,000 people called in. The lines were jammed for hours. People were crying, begging the government to make it stop because they couldn't live in their own homes anymore. The Canadian government finally sent in the elite, acoustic scientists from the University of Windsor and Western University. These guys didn't bring consumer microphones. They brought in pentangular arrays, which are specialized high-tech sensors designed to detect secret underground nuclear tests. They braved the freezing winter winds and triangulated the signal along the Detroit River for months. Every time the hum spiked to an unbearable level, the sensors pointed across the water to a 600-acre man-made industrial fortress called Zug Island. Zug Island is a private high-security zone owned by US Steel. It's one of the most polluted square miles in the country, but the scientists found a detail in the land's history that wasn't in any industrial brochure. Before the steel mills, Zug Island was a massive indigenous burial ground. For thousands of years, it was a sacred site. In the early 1900s, when they dug the canal to turn the land into an island, they unearthed thousands of human remains. They didn't stop. They just pushed the bones aside to make room for the blast furnaces. The Canadian government officially asked to inspect the machinery on the island. They wanted to see if a specific furnace was vibrating at exactly 35 hertz, the frequency of the hum. The response? A flat no. American companies and officials cited national security and proprietary secrets. For nearly a decade, 22,000 people were forced to live in a state of physical and mental torture because a private island refused to let anyone look inside the gates. In April 2020, the steel mill finally shut down due to the global pandemic. And just like that, the hum vanished. Mike Provost got to sleep in his own bed for the first time in 9 years. After nearly a decade of his house vibrating like a living thing, the silence felt heavy, almost like a physical weight. It took weeks for his brain to stop expecting the thrum. He would wake up in the middle of the night, heart racing, convinced he felt a phantom vibration, only to realize it was just the blood pumping in his own ears. Eventually, the migraines faded. The nosebleeds stopped. Mike finally got to sleep in his own bed, in a house that was finally truly still. The Windsor Hum became a ghost story, a dark chapter in the city's history that people wanted to forget. Alright guys, if you made it this far, I honestly can't thank you enough for sticking around to the end of the story. This is actually a pretty big milestone for my small little channel. It's the very first time I've used my own voice for long-form narration. I've spent way too long trying to get the audio and atmosphere right to do the story justice, but I'm still learning. So if you got a second, I'd love to hear your honest thoughts in the comments. Your feedback is really the only way I can make the next one even better. Also, if you've enjoyed the vibe I'm building here, I would super appreciate if you consider subscribing. I'm planning to get new videos dropping twice a week, and I'd love to have you along for the ride. Until next time, stay safe out there.